The hydraulic line split at 2:47 in the afternoon. Not during morning prep, not at the end of a long day when you could limp home and deal with it tomorrow. Right in the middle of a push. Right when the corn was at 18% moisture, and the forecast said rain in 72 hours, and every acre you didn't get off today was an acre you'd fight for all week. Tom Vickery felt the steering go soft first. Then he saw the fluid mist rising from the left rear wheel well, catching the low autumn sun like smoke. He throttled down, set the brake, and climbed out of the cab. The ground beneath the tractor was already dark with hydraulic oil, spreading in a slow, expensive pool. He didn't swear. He didn't kick anything. He just stood there with his hands on his hips, staring at a problem that was going to cost him 3 days minimum, maybe 5. Behind him, 940 acres of corn stood waiting. Across the road, he could hear the low, steady rumble of his neighbor's tractor still running, still working, still on time. Tom pulled his phone out and called the dealership. It had started 16 months earlier, in a different kind of pressure. Tom had been running a 20-year-old Massey Ferguson 8160 that had given him everything it had and then some. But the transmission was slipping, the clutch was done, and the cab leaked cold air all winter. He needed something newer. Not new, he wasn't that kind of farmer, but newer. Something reliable. Something that wouldn't nurses him through another planting season on hope and duct tape. So he drove into Brenner Ag Solutions on a Tuesday morning in February, boots still muddy from morning chores, and walked into the showroom. The dealership was one of the big ones. Green and yellow everywhere. Flags snapping in the wind outside. A row of new iron lined up like soldiers on the lot, polished and bright under the winter sky. Tom had bought from them before. A baler, a disc, some smaller equipment. They'd always been fine. Professional. Fast on parts when he needed them. He figured he'd look at a Massey Ferguson 6S or maybe a 7S if the price was right. Mid-range. Proven. Something he could run for the next 15 years without thinking about it. He found a salesman near the back. Younger guy, confident, good handshake. Name tag said Garrett. Looking for a tractor, Tom said. Something in the 180 to 220 horsepower range. Thought I'd start with the Massey lineup. Garrett smiled, nodded. Led him toward the lot. But he didn't stop at the red tractors. He walked past them. Listen, Garrett said, slowing his pace. I'll show you the Masseys if you want. But I'm going to be straight with you. Parts are a nightmare right now. Tom looked at him. What do you mean? AGCO's having supply chain issues. Everybody knows it. You break down, you could be waiting 2 weeks, maybe 3, just to get a hydraulic pump or a sensor. And that's if it's in the country. He shook his head. I've got guys sitting dead in the field right now waiting on parts. It's ugly. Tom frowned. I've been running Massey for 20 years. Never had a problem getting parts. 20 years ago, sure, Garrett said. Different world now. Global supply chain, COVID backlog, all that. Deere's got the infrastructure. They stock everything. You break something, we get it here next day, maybe same day if it's common. Massey? He shrugged. You're rolling the dice. Tom stood there, hands in his jacket pockets, looking at the row of red tractors sitting quiet on the edge of the lot. Garrett let the silence sit for a second. Then he gestured toward a green machine near the front. A John Deere 6M, 185 horsepower, low hours, clean as church. This one just came in. Trade-in from a farm up near Walton, 600 hours, full service history, Deere engine, Deere hydraulics, Deere everything. You know what you're getting. And if something does go wrong, which it won't, we've got every part in the building. Tom looked at it. It was a good-looking machine, tight, well-kept. The price was fair, but it wasn't what he came for. I'll think about it, Tom said. Garrett nodded, still smiling. No pressure. Just don't want to see you stuck when it matters. Tom left the dealership that day without buying anything, but the words stuck with him. Parts are a nightmare right now. You could be waiting 2 weeks, maybe 3. I've got guys sitting dead in the field. He thought about it during evening chores, thought about it over dinner, thought about it while he sat at the kitchen table that night, running numbers on a legal pad. He didn't want to wait 3 weeks for a part. He didn't want to be the guy sitting in the field while everyone else finished. He didn't want to gamble. So 2 days later, he went back to Brenner Ag Solutions and bought the John Deere 6M. Garrett shook his hand, smiled wide, and said, "You made the right call." The tractor ran fine for the first year. Tom used it for everything: planting, spraying, baling, loader work. It was smooth, quiet, easy to operate. The cab was tight. The controls were responsive. It did what he asked it to do. He didn't love it the way he'd loved the old Massey Ferguson, but he didn't need to love it. He needed it to work. And it did, until it didn't. The call to the dealership rang 4 times before someone picked up. Brenner Ag, Parts Department. Yeah, this is Tom Vickery. I've got a 6M out here that just blew a hydraulic line. I need a replacement. High pressure line, left rear circuit. There was a pause. Typing. Oping. Okay, let me pull up your unit. More typing. All right, I'm showing that line as a special order. We don't stock that one. Tom felt something tighten in his chest. What do you mean you don't stock it? It's not a common failure part, so we don't keep it on the shelf. But I can get it ordered. Should be here in, more typing, looks like 5 to 6 business days. 6 days? That's the fastest I can do. It's coming from the regional warehouse in Illinois. Tom stood there in the middle of his field, phone pressed to his ear, staring at the tractor that was supposed to keep him moving. I was told you'd have parts same day. We do, for most things, but this isn't a high turnover item. I'm sorry, man. 6 days is the best I've got. Tom hung up. He called a local hydraulic shop. They could fabricate something custom, maybe, but it would take 3 days and cost twice as much, and they couldn't guarantee it would hold under full pressure. He called another dealership 2 towns over. Same story. Special order. 5 days minimum. He sat down on the back tire of the tractor and looked across the road. Paul Harmon's Massey Ferguson 7S was still running. Steady. Smooth. The corn head glinting in the afternoon light as it pulled through row after row without stopping. Paul had been his neighbor for 18 years. Quiet guy. Older. Ran about 1,100 acres, same as Tom. They waved when they passed each other on the road. Borrowed equipment now and then. Helped each other with harvest if one of them got behind. Paul had been in the field since 7:30 that morning. He'd finish his section by sundown. Tomorrow he'd start the next one. Tom would be sitting here, dead in the field for the next 6 days. That night, Tom sat in his kitchen and did the math. 6 days down meant 6 days of no harvest. The corn was ready now. Moisture was good. If he waited 6 days, the forecast showed rain moving in on day 4. Maybe an inch. Maybe more. That would push moisture back up. He'd have to wait for it to dry again. That could add another week, 2 weeks total, maybe more. Every day over 20% moisture cost him 8 cents per bushel in drying fees. On 940 acres at 180 bushels per acre, that was $3,536 if he had to dry everything. And that was assuming he got it off before the weather turned ugly. He thought about calling Garrett, demanding faster service, threatening to take his business elsewhere. But what would that do? The part was in Illinois. It wasn't coming any faster. He looked at his phone, looked at the contact labeled Paul Harmon. He hesitated. Then he made the call. Paul picked up on the second ring. "Tom, what's going on?" "Hey, Paul, I've got a hydraulic line blown on the deer. Dealership says 6 days for the part. I know you're running Massey. I was wondering if you've ever had issues getting parts." There was a pause. Not awkward, just thoughtful. "What kind of line?" "High pressure, left rear circuit." "Hold on." Tom heard Paul set the phone down, heard him talking to someone in the background, his wife maybe. Then he came back. "I'm going to make a call. Give me 10 minutes. "You don't have to." 10 minutes. Paul hung up. Tom sat there staring at the phone. 9 minutes later it rang. "Tom, you still there?" "Yeah, part ships tonight. You'll have it tomorrow afternoon. Maybe sooner." Tom blinked. "What?" "I called my guy at Redfield Agco. Told him what you needed. He's got it in stock, said he'll have it on a truck first thing in the morning. Should be at your place by 3 p.m. tomorrow." Tom didn't say anything for a long moment. "Paul, I don't even run Massey anymore." "I know," Paul said, "but I do, and my guy takes care of people. What do I owe you?" "Nothing. Just call Redfield when the part gets there and settle up with them. They'll bill you direct." Tom sat there in his kitchen, phone still against his ear, feeling something he couldn't quite name. "Thanks, Paul." "No problem. Get that corn off." Paul hung up. The part arrived at 2:35 p.m. the next day. Tom installed it himself in under an hour. By 4 p.m., he was back in the field. He finished his section by 9:30 that night, running under the lights. The deer ran smooth, the repair held, everything worked. But he couldn't stop thinking about the phone call. Paul had made one call. One. And the part was there in 24 hours. Tom had called his own dealership, the one that sold him the tractor, the one that promised same-day parts, the one that told him Massey Ferguson would leave him stranded, and they'd told him 6 days. Paul had called a guy at a small Agco dealership 30 miles away and had the part on a truck before breakfast. Tom didn't say anything to anyone about it, not to his wife, not to his brother, not to Garrett. But he didn't forget it either. Winter came and went. Spring planting went fine. The deer did its job. Tom told himself it was a fluke, a one-time thing. Supply chains were messy. Everyone was dealing with it. But in the back of his mind, a question had planted itself. If Paul can get a part in 24 hours, why couldn't they? The second breakdown happened in July. Tom was spraying fungicide on soybeans when the display screen in the cab went black. No warning, no error code, just black. He tried rebooting. Nothing. Tried pulling fuses. Nothing. The tractor still ran, but he had no guidance system, no application rate monitor, no section control. He was blind. He called Brenner AG. Sounds like the main controller module, the parts guy said. Let me check stock. Tom waited. Yeah, we don't have that one. That's a special order too. How long? 7 to 10 days. Tom closed his eyes. Can you overnight it? Not from the warehouse. They don't do expedited shipping on electronics. Liability thing. Tom hung up. He sat in the cab for a long time, staring at the black screen. Then he called Paul again. This time, Paul didn't even hesitate. Give me the serial number. Tom read it off the data plate. Hold on. 3 minutes later, Paul called back. Parts in Kansas City. Redfield's got a guy driving through there tomorrow for a trade show. He'll grab it and drop it off on his way back. Day after tomorrow, noon. Tom felt something crack open inside his chest. Paul, why is this so easy for you? Paul was quiet for a moment. Because I've been running Massey for 30 years, he said. And Agco dealers don't work like the big green machine. They know their customers. They move fast. They don't make you wait because some algorithm says the part isn't high turnover. He paused. You bought from the wrong place, Tom. Tom didn't argue. The part arrived on schedule. He installed it. The tractor worked. But something had shifted. By the time fall rolled around again, Tom had started paying attention. He noticed that Paul's Massey Ferguson 7S ran all season without a single breakdown. Not one. He noticed that when Paul did need something, a belt, a filter, a sensor, he had it within 48 hours. Every time. He noticed that Paul never looked stressed during harvest, never looked like he was racing the weather, never sat dead in a field waiting. Tom, meanwhile, had been down 3 times in 16 months. Hydraulic line, controller module, and then in late September a DEF sensor that took 9 days to arrive because it was back-ordered nationwide. 9 days. He'd lost 120 acres to weather damage that year because he couldn't get the deer moving fast enough. At the co-op one afternoon, another farmer, guy named Bill Schroeder, mentioned he was thinking about trading in his Case IH for a Massey Ferguson. Parts are too slow, Bill said. I'm tired of waiting. Tom just nodded. He didn't say anything, but he was thinking the same thing. That winter, Tom started doing research. He called other Massey Ferguson owners, asked about parts availability, asked about dealer support, asked about downtime. Every single one of them said the same thing. Parts were fast. Dealers were responsive. Downtime was rare. He called Agco's customer service line and asked about supply chain improvements. They told him they'd invested heavily in North American parts distribution over the past 2 years. Faster shipping, better inventory, regional hubs. He looked up dealer reviews for Redfield Agco. 4.8 stars, hundreds of reviews. Words like fast, reliable, honest kept showing up. He looked up Brenner Ag Solutions. 3.2 stars, common complaints, slow on parts, pushy sales, don't return calls. He pulled out the purchase agreement from 16 months ago and read it again. Garrett had promised same-day parts availability, but the fine print said on stocked items, and apparently almost nothing was stocked. Tom sat at his kitchen table, staring at the paperwork, and realized he'd been sold a story, not a machine, a story. In March, Tom drove to Redfield Agco. He didn't call ahead, Didn't make an appointment. Just drove the 30 miles on a cold Tuesday morning and walked into the showroom. It was smaller than Brenner Ag, older building, no flags, no polished displays. Just a handful of red tractors parked outside and a parts counter in the back that looked like it had been there since 1987. A man in his 50s looked up from behind the counter. Graying hair, flannel shirt, name tag said Dale. "Help you?" "Yeah," Tom said. "I'm looking to trade in a John Deere 6M, wondering what you've got in Massey Ferguson." Dale didn't blink, didn't smile, just nodded. "You the guy Paul Harmon called about last year?" Tom stopped. "Yeah, that was me." Dale nodded again. "Figured you've had a rough go with that Deere. How do you know?" "Paul mentioned it. Said you'd been down a few times. Said Brenner wasn't taking care of you." He leaned on the counter. "We've got a 7S.215 out back, 950 hours. One owner. Traded it in for an 8S last month. It's clean. Runs perfect. Want to see it?" Tom followed him outside. The tractor sat in the back row, red paint still bright under the March sun. 215 horsepower. AGCO power engine. CVT transmission. Cab looked new. Dale handed him the keys. "Take it for a drive. I've got paperwork to do." Tom climbed into the cab, started it up, pulled out of the lot and onto the county road. The tractor was smooth, tight, responsive. The CVT shifted seamlessly. The steering was precise. The cab was quieter than the Deere. He drove it for 20 minutes, turned around, came back. Dale was still at the counter when he walked in. "What do you think?" "I think I want to know what you'll give me for the Deere." Dale pulled out a laptop, looked up the serial number, typed for a minute. "I'll give you $92,000. That's trade-in. I can have you out the door in the Massey for $168,000 total. Finance it if you want, cash if you don't." Tom thought about it. "What about parts?" Dale looked at him. "You need a part, you call me. If I don't have it here, I'll have it by the next day. If it's an emergency, I'll drive it to you myself." He paused. "I've been doing this for 32 years. I don't sell iron and disappear. I sell iron and make sure it keeps running." Tom stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at the man behind the counter. Then he nodded. "Let's do the paperwork." Tom drove the Massey Ferguson 7S.215 home that afternoon. He didn't tell anyone he'd traded, didn't post about it, didn't make a big deal. He just parked it in the shed next to the old 8160 and went inside for dinner. The next morning, he took it out to finish some tillage work. It ran flawlessly. 2 weeks later, a hydraulic coupling started weeping. Not a failure, just a slow drip, normal wear. He called Dale. "I've got it here," Dale said. "I'll have it on your porch by 5 p.m. The part arrived at 4:45. Tom installed it in 15 minutes. He stood in his shop afterward, looking at the tractor, and realized something. He wasn't worried anymore. He wasn't wondering if a part would show up, wasn't wondering if he'd be dead in the field during harvest, wasn't wondering if the dealership would pick up the phone. He just knew. If something broke, it would get fixed, fast. That was worth more than horsepower, more than features, more than paint color. It was worth everything. Spring planting that year was uneventful. The Massey ran 420 hours without a single issue. Tom planted 1,140 acres in 9 days, finished a day ahead of schedule. In June, he needed a fuel filter, called Dale, had it in 36 hours. In August, a sensor threw a code, called Dale. He walked Tom through a diagnostic over the phone. Problem solved in 10 minutes. No part needed. In October, during harvest, Tom ran the Massey Ferguson 7S.215 for 17 straight days. Morning to night, 1,100 acres of corn, 340 acres of soybeans. Not one breakdown, not one delay, not one phone call to the dealership asking where a part was. He finished harvest on November 3rd, a full week ahead of schedule. The corn came off at 16% moisture. No drying fees, no weather damage, no stress. Paul Harmon finished 2 days later. They ran into each other at the co-op the following week. Paul nodded at him. "Saw you running red this year." Tom nodded back. "Yeah, made the switch. How's it treating you? Like I should have done it 2 years ago." Paul smiled, didn't say anything else, didn't need to. They both knew. The following spring, Tom ran into Garrett at a farm show. Garrett saw him first, walked over, hand extended, big smile. "Tom, how's that 6M treating you?" Tom looked at him. "I don't have it anymore." Garrett's smile faltered. "Oh, you upgrade?" "No," Tom said. "I traded it in, bought a Massey Ferguson." Garrett blinked. Massey, I thought you were worried about parts availability. Tom didn't smile, didn't soften it. You told me I'd be waiting 2 weeks for parts. Told me Deere had everything in stock. He paused. I was down 3 times in 16 months. Every time it took a week or more to get a part. My neighbor, who runs Massey, got me parts in 24 hours, twice. Garrett opened his mouth, closed it. Tom, listen, supply chain stuff is complicated. No, Tom said. It's not. You lied to make a sale, and it cost me a season. He turned and walked away. Garrett didn't follow. By the end of that second year, Tom had put 1,800 hours on the Massey Ferguson 7S 215. He'd called Dale 6 times. 4 of those calls were for routine maintenance parts. 1 was for a wiring harness. 1 was just to ask a question. Every time, Dale picked up. Every time, the part showed up fast. Every time, Tom was back to work within a day. He never waited. He never sat in a field staring at his phone, wondering when help would come. He just farmed. And at the end of the year, when he sat down and ran the numbers, he realized something else. The Massey Ferguson had saved him $31,000. Not because it was cheaper to buy, it wasn't, but because it didn't cost him time. Time was the variable no one talked about. Time was what you lost when you sat dead in a field waiting for a part. Time was what you paid for when the weather turned and you weren't ready. Time was what bled you dry, slow and quiet, until you looked up one day and realized you were behind. The Massey Ferguson didn't steal his time. It gave it back. 3 years after Tom bought the Massey Ferguson, he was standing in his shed one evening, wiping down the tractor after a long day when his phone rang. It was a guy named Travis, younger farmer, ran about 800 acres, 2 counties over. Tom had met him once at a soil health seminar. Hey Tom, sorry to bother you. I heard you switched from Deere to Massey a few years back. I'm looking at doing the same thing. Mind if I ask you a couple questions? Tom leaned against the tractor. Sure. Did you have problems with parts? On the Deere? Yeah, every time something broke, I waited a week or more. And the Massey? Never more than 2 days, usually less. Travis was quiet for a moment. I'm at Brenner Ag right now. Salesman's telling me Massey parts are slow. Says I'll be stuck if I go red. Tom smiled. Not a friendly smile, a knowing one. Yeah, they told me the same thing. Is it true? No, Tom said. It's not, but they'll keep saying it as long as people keep believing it. What should I do? Tom looked at the Massey Ferguson sitting in his shed. 3 years old, 4,200 hours. Still ran like the day he bought it. Call Redfield Agco. Ask for Dale. Tell him I sent you. Thanks, Tom. No problem. Travis hung up. Tom stood there in the quiet of his shed, looking at the red tractor in front of him, and thought about all the things he'd learned. He'd learned that loyalty was expensive when it was misplaced. He'd learned that a dealership's promises meant nothing if they couldn't back them up. He'd learned that the right equipment wasn't always the biggest, or the greenest, or the one everyone else bought. It was the one that kept you moving. And he'd learned that sometimes the best decision you ever made was the one you made after you'd already been burned. 4 months later, Tom got a text from Travis. Just finished spring planting. 850 acres in 8 days. Massey ran perfect. Thanks for the tip. Tom texted back. Welcome to the red side. He set his phone down and walked outside. Paul Harmon was driving past on the road, heading home from his own field. He lifted a hand. Tom lifted one back. Across the way, the Massey Ferguson 7S.215 sat in the shed, ready for tomorrow. Tom didn't think about the Deere anymore, didn't think about Garrett, didn't think about the 6 days he'd lost, or the 9 days, or the week he'd spent waiting while his neighbor kept moving. He just thought about the next season, and the season after that. And all the time he'd get back,